funding and what gets funded, I think it's important to note that it's not just what we as scientists think is important or policymakers think is important, but for organisations like the Alzheimer's Society, when we put in a grant application, it goes out to over 250 lay experts associated with the Alzheimer's Society, and they all read our applications and they all give it a priority out of 10. So it's not just what scientists or policymakers think is important, but it is what the general public think is important and should be funded, which is getting the money if you donate to Alzheimer's Society.
Okay, there was just a couple there. We'll go first. We'll try and get as many as we can before I get kicked out.
Okay, my question is to do with the association studies that you've done, and I'm wondering if my sister has Alzheimer's, do I have a risk? What's the family associations?
Okay, so I think if you remember back to the green and red circles, what I was trying to say is that if your sister has Alzheimer's, the chance that you're more likely to get Alzheimer's than the general population is negligible.
Can I just ask, is this a hypothetical sister or?
Yes, it is a hypothetical.
Right,
so let's say there's two situations you and your hypothetical sister might be in. If your sister has Alzheimer's and it runs in the family, there's about 5 or 10% of Alzheimer's is genuinely familial, and by that I mean it goes from parent to children. But that's very, very rare. There's a few known mutations. Actually, there are known mutations in genes that process these proteins that we looked at. And if you have those mutations, then we passed on through the family. But that's really, really rare. Most cases, it's inheritance of genetic susceptibility factors that increase your risk by, I was talking there, there were 20 genes known that each increase their risk by about 1.5 times. So if the pack is shuffled of genes and you've got several of them, it may increase your risk, but that just increases the risk. There's then other factors. So you get a combination of genes, you eat unhealthily, you don't sleep properly, you don't do enough exercise, then that may lead to Alzheimer's, where you've got the same genetic composition as your sister and you're an exercise fiend and you do all those things that we were told you should do, then you may not get it, but your sister may. So it's hugely complex genes and environment together that's actually impossible to pull apart. And the case of Alzheimer's, in which definitely, grandmother, child and grandson get it, are really, really rare.
But it also might be that your adopted sister might have simply because of the environment you were both brought up in and the lifestyle that you both have.
Yeah, so it's hypothetical adopted sisters, which you're not related to, but then it's there's a huge wealth of literature out there, and it's a mix of both genes and environment. The genes don't necessarily define the cause; they tell you about the proteins that are involved that may be suitable targets for drugs.
Okay, then I have a follow-up question to that then, and that would be.
As long as it's not about your brother, yes.
Whether treatment then would be person-specific, whether the types of treatment would be different for different people based on that combination of genes and lifestyle.
So, what the association studies are designed to show is that those 20 genes, you may think, do they have something in common? And then the more we understand about cell biology, you might find that of those 20 genes, 15 of them lie in one biological pathway. And therefore, it's not 20 unrelated genes, it's suddenly 20 genes of small effect, but they're in the same pathway. And then you can start to think of targeting molecules, targeting drugs to proteins in that cellular pathway. Any of the stages in the pathway would be suitable, and they'd all be suitable in any person. But we only found out about this pathway because you could study tens of thousands of people with the disease. So I think the risk factors that you inherit may make you more likely to do it. So you might be stimulated to go and do more exercise and eat more healthily. But the personalised medicine tells you about risk, but the treatments probably will be common to everyone.
Can I ask you follow up to that though? In the same way as we used to sometimes talk about cancer, of course now we talk about cancers and subsets of cancers. As we move to a more bespoke forms of medicine we're dealing with, is there possibilities there are lots of different Alzheimer's?
So there probably are lots of different Alzheimer's, a wide range of ages of onset, and then there's also related families diseases, frontotemporal dementia, which have often slightly different pathologies. When you look at the brain of patients who've had these diseases, they can be very different. Most Parkinson's patients will develop a dementia if they survive the disease for 10 years. So So whether that's the same drivers of dementia or not, we don't know, but we're finding out. So it may be that there's lots of different causes of dementia, which may have different therapies.
Okay, I'm going to go just along slightly.
Thank you very much. I just wondered what sort of age you're doing your research on, what sort of age group of people you're conducting your research on. My colleague, two friends here, and I all work for Young Dementia UK in Oxford, and obviously we're seeing people with early onset dementia, people in their as young as their 40s, 50s, 60s. Are you doing much research on younger people with early onset dementia?
Who are you looking at?
I beg your pardon? To both of you, really, actually, yourself.
So, well, so I'll go first. So, younger cases, it is thought that younger cases of, say, Alzheimer's or Parkinson's are more likely to be more genetic. It's not sure, but it's thought that if these disorders occur from, you and your set of genes being battered by the environment for 70 years, if it occurs more likely, less battering is needed, so it might be more driven by genetics inside you. So, for example, with the stem cell work I talked about, if you're able to take cells from individuals who are more likely to have the disease for a genetic reason, the cells you can grow are more likely to be different because it's more driven from the genes inside the cells. So many of the earlier cases are taken and studied for to make these skin biopsies, to make these cell models, because it's more likely to have a greater genetic component.
We do studies then on adults all the way across the lifespan, but most of the facts and the figures and the looking at how lifestyle factors can help prevent dementia, they are particularly based upon late onset dementia, not the familial type.
Okay, we're way out of time, but I want to try and answer the questions in the room. So, short answers, panel, if at all possible, and short questions, if possible, audience.
Hi, I'm interested in the tangles and the amyloid plaques. Are they increasing in frequency as the cortical thickness goes down, or are they a completely different disease process? And what are tangles?
So this is not a short answer.
It's a tangled tale, I'm afraid, yes.
The bottom line is that these things all happen together, so that the parts of the brain, the medial temporal lobe that we looked at, also, that was what was recorded in the imaging, but they also get chock-a-block full of these. The short answer is that we have these amyloid plaques building up outside the cell, made of a particular protein called A-beta peptide, and there's protein inside the cell called tau protein that build up as well. Whether or not and how these two pathologies interact isn't known, but you need both of them to be defined as Alzheimer's, and together it's not. What's really the sort of short answer is they're not known whether they're driving the cell to die, or whether these tau tangles were sort of last gasp of the cell to package up protein aggregates into something that they can survive with. But it's the key pathology noticed by Alzheimer's 100 years ago when we first saw the disease.
That's pretty impressively short. Okay, right over there, sorry, another 1 more minute of your exercise, only 148 to go.
You need that wristwatch.
Whilst I can appreciate, obviously, it's Science Oxford, I was just wondering if between the three of you had any views on sort of the way other cultures might view dementia, and whether or not, from a scientific perspective, whether or not that certain ethnicities have more susceptibility, but also from the more personal side, kind of just as a way out, there's theories that people see mental health as something strange and spiritual from certain cultures. Is there anything that you've come across in dementia that people have explained in sort of more cultural ways?
It's a very interesting question. Do we have any expertise on what we do? Andy?
Well, all I'd say is that I did some work with Age UK and a researcher into gay and lesbian treatments in dementia, and it was very interesting because of the staff in the care homes and the attitudes that they had towards illness was often very different. But it was interesting that when we looked at it, actually, the whole of society had come a long way in that particular regard. In that, I think up until about 1998, the World Health Organization still thought that homosexuality was a treatable mental illness. So I think we've all come a long way, but I think that, yes, there are some cultural differences, and I think that needs to be addressed by some care homes when they interview staff, because there are some differences. But having said that, I am very much optimistic that the standards of care in care homes, because of the knowledge of dementia, it's gradually going up. But I just hope that it continues at an increasing rate, because let's face it, most of our care homes are actually run by people who are non-Indigenous.
Okay, I know we're tight for time, we'll have to leave it. That moves to the one immediately ahead of you.
Hi, following from the last question about residential care, you have been very upbeat in your research, and I'm thinking about someone asked about making research on making life better for people who've already got dementias, and this question comes from a carer perspective, and I feel that the residential care is so patchy, and in some cases it doesn't meet, it is following that old model of meeting the basic needs but not looking at compassionately at people, that I think, and so much is hidden when the manager goes home, that I fear that we will look back on this period as we look back on Bedlam, actually, with shame, as a generalisation. And so I wonder if there are any alternative models out there, like Andy's clubs, to residential care that you could tell us about.
I think there are different approaches, yes, certainly. It basically comes down to the ethos that is held within the team, and I have known that change overnight. I don't see any reason why that can't continue to improve. I'd like to see more openness in a lot of care homes, and there was again some research done by the Mental Health Foundation around inviting families into care homes and making them far more involved in the care, and therefore they became more of the culture and were able to report back, and standards in this particular instance, they certainly rose. And so I think that will be a way forward for me, rather than having outside inspectors involving the family carers, inviting them in the local community, so it becomes more of a local community thing rather than something isolated.
Do you want to comment briefly? No, fine. I think that is where we really must leave, because we are at the time. As I said, the three speakers are going to stay on. Just before we finish, just a quick non-Scottish style referendum here. I've got a quick question for, as a result of what you've got three possibilities here. One is, do you feel as a result of what you've heard tonight slightly more optimistic about our ability to, if not defeat dementia, at least make significant inroads? Two, do you feel largely unchanged? Or three, do you feel a bit more pessimistic? We've had everything from technological optimism to reports of Bedlam. So can you stick up hands up first of all if you feel slightly more optimistic as a result of what you've heard tonight? Okay. Who is sort of largely unchanged? And who's going to leave here feeling a little bit more pessimistic? Okay, so more optimistic than not. I think that's probably as good a news as we're going to get. So first of all, can we please thank again our wonderful panel, Dr. Claire Sexton, Andy Buckland, and Professor Richard Wade-Martins. Apologies to anyone if you were also expecting Professor John Gallagher. He forgot, which is kind of ironic for this, that he was also supposed to be at an event in Ottawa today, so he had to pull out at the last minute. Thank you to the MRC for sponsorship. Thanks to yourselves for coming along, to Jude and Steve and everyone from Science Oxford for organising tonight's event, and to Claire and everyone from the venue. You might want to make a note in your diaries that our next one on the theme of polar exploration, slightly different, is on Friday, November the 7th, and then on the 28th of November, we have a special festive event of Science of Cheese and Wine, which of course includes lots of very lovely cheese and wine to sample and taste. I hope to see you then. For now, good night. Thank you. If you've got any questions direct to the panel, they will be upstairs in the atrium. Thank you for coming along.